Little Emma walked slowly down Maple Street on that warm Tuesday afternoon. Her pink school bag bounced gently on her back with each step she took. The 8-year-old girl had always loved this walk home from school. It was her favorite part of the day. Emma would always stop to pet Mrs. Johnson's fluffy orange cat that sat on the garden fence. The cat would purr and rub against a small hand. Then she would wave at Mr. Davis, who was usually working in his colorful flower garden. He would smile and wave back at her every single day, but today felt different somehow. Emma couldn't put her finger on what was wrong, but something made her feel uneasy. She noticed a police car moving very slowly behind her. The car had been following her for several minutes now. Officer Williams sat behind the wheel of his patrol car. He had been watching the little girl walk down the street. His eyes followed her every movement. Emma noticed him in the corner of her, and her heart began to beat faster. She had never been in trouble before and couldn't understand why a police officer would be watching her. The little girl tried to walk normally, but her hands began to shake. She clutched her school bag tighter and quickened her pace slightly. She just wanted to get home to her mother's warm hugs and afternoon snacks. "Hey, you there?" Officer Williams suddenly called out in a loud voice. He stepped out of his patrol car and slammed the door hard. "Stop right there." "Young lady." Emma stopped walking immediately. She turned around slowly, her brown eyes wide with confusion and fear. Her small body trembled as she faced the tall officer. "Yes, sir. Did I do something wrong?" she asked in a tiny voice. Officer Williams walked closer to her with heavy steps. His face was stern and cold. "Someone stole candy from the corner shop about an hour ago. You match the description of the thief," he said without any kindness in his voice. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head quickly. "But I didn't steal anything, sir. I promise I didn't. I was just walking home from school. I always take this path home." The officer crossed his arms and looked down at her with suspicion. "That's what they all say when they get caught. All you kids are the same." Emma's voice began to tremble as she spoke. "Please, sir, I really didn't take anything. You can ask my teacher. I was in class all day. I don't even like candy very much." But Officer Williams wasn't listening to her words. He had already made up his mind about what he thought had happened. "Turn round and put your hands behind your back," he ordered. Emma started to cry harder now. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she pleaded with the officer. "Please, sir, I didn't do anything wrong. I just want to go home to my mum. She's waiting for me." Double quotes Mrs. Johnson, who had been watering her plants, heard the commotion outside. She dropped her watering can and ran to her front gate. "What's happening here?" she called out. Officer Williams ignored the neighbor and reached for his handcuffs. Emma saw the metal cuffs and became even more frightened. She had never seen handcuffs up close before. "Officer, this is Emma Thompson," Mrs. Johnson shouted from her gate. "She's a good child. She would never steal anything. She walks this way every day after school." But Officer Williams had already decided what he was going to do. He grabbed Emma's small wrists and put the cold metal handcuffs on them. They were much too big for her tiny hands. Emma sobbed loudly now. "I want my mummy. Please let me go home. I didn't do anything bad." More neighbors began to come outside to see what was happening. Mr. Davis stopped working in his garden and walked toward the street. Mrs. Peterson came out with her baby in arms. They all watched in shock as the police officer treated the little girl so harshly. "This isn't right," Mr. Davis said to his wife. "That child has never caused any trouble. She's always polite and kind." Officer Williams guided the crying child toward his patrol car. Emma's legs felt weak and she stumbled slightly. She couldn't believe this was really happening to her. "Please don't put me in the car," Emma whispered through her tears. "I'm scared. I want to call my mummy." But the officer opened the back door of the police car and helped Emma inside. The little girl curled up in the corner of the seat and cried. Even harder, she didn't understand why this was happening to her. All she had wanted was to go home and tell her mother about her day at school. The neighbors stood watching with sad and angry faces. They knew Emma was innocent. They had watched her grow up in their neighborhood. She was always respectful and kind to everyone. Mrs. Johnson quickly went inside her house and called Emma's mother at work. Her hands shook as she dialed the number. She knew this phone call would change everything for Emma and her family. The police car drove away. With Emma still crying in the back seat, the little girl pressed her face against the window. Looking back at her neighborhood, she wondered when she would see her home again. Detective Inspector Catherine Thompson sat at the large wooden table in the meeting room at Scotland Yard. She was discussing an important case with her team when her mobile phone began to ring. Catherine looked at the screen and saw it was a number she didn't recognize from her hometown. She almost ignored the call because the meeting was so important, but something told her to answer it. Catherine excused herself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway. "Hello, this is Detective Inspector Thompson," she said into the phone. The voice on the other end was shaky and upset. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Mrs. Johnson from Maple Street. I'm so sorry to call you at work, but this is about your daughter Emma. She's been arrested." Catherine felt her heart stop beating for a moment. The words didn't make sense to her. "What did you say? Emma has been arrested? That's impossible. She's only 8 years old." Mrs. Johnson's voice was filled with sadness. "I saw it happen with my own eyes. Officer Williams put handcuffs on her and took her away in his police car. She was crying and asking for you." Catherine's hands began to shake. "What did they say?" "She did. Emma would never hurt anyone or do anything wrong. They said she stole candy from the corner shop. But I know that's not true. Emma is a good child. She was just walking home from school like she does every day." Catherine felt anger building inside her chest. As one of Britain's top investigators, she had seen injustice many times in her career. She had fought for the rights of people who couldn't fight for themselves. But this was different. This was a baby girl. "I'm coming home right now," Catherine said firmly. "Thank you for calling me." Catherine rushed back into the meeting room. Her colleagues looked up at her with concern. When they saw her face, "I have to leave immediately. There's been an emergency with my daughter." Chief Inspector Roberts stood up from his chair. "What's happened?" "Catherine, is Emma all right?" "She's been arrested by the local police in our town. They're saying she stole candy." Catherine's voice was steady, but her colleagues could see the fire in her eyes. An 8-year-old arrested for stealing candy. "That doesn't sound right," Detective Mills said with a frown. Catherine grabbed her coat and bag. "I'll call you from the station. I might need backup." The drive to her hometown felt like the longest journey of Catherine's life. She kept thinking about Emma's scared face and wondering what her daughter was going through. Catherine had spent years protecting other people's children from unfair treatment. Now she needed to protect her own. When Catherine arrived at the small police station, she walked through the front door with purpose. The desk sergeant looked up at her with surprise. "I'm here to see my daughter Emma Thompson. She was brought in about an hour ago." The sergeant looked at his paperwork. "Are you the mother?" "You'll need to wait while we process the case." Catherine pulled out her identification card and placed it on the desk. "I'm Detective Inspector Catherine Thompson from Scotland Yard. I want to see my daughter right now." The sergeant's face went pale when he saw her credentials. He had heard of Catherine Thompson. Everyone in law enforcement knew her name. She was famous for solving difficult cases and fighting for justice. Right away, "Detective Inspector, please follow me." Catherine was led down a narrow hallway to a small room. When she opened the door, she found Emma sitting on a chair that was too big for her. The little girl's eyes were red from crying. "Mummy." Emma jumped up and ran into her mother's arms. Catherine held her daughter tight against her chest. She could feel Emma's small body shaking with fear. "I'm here now, sweetheart. Everything is going to be okay. Mummy, I didn't do anything wrong. I promise I didn't steal anything." Emma whispered through her tears. "I was just walking home from school. I wanted to come home and have a snack with you." Catherine stroked her daughter's hair gently. "I know, sweetheart. I know you didn't do anything wrong. Mommy is here now, and I'm going to fix this." Sergeant Peterson entered the room looking very nervous. He had just learned who Emma's mother was. "Detective Inspector Thompson, there seems to have been a mistake. We can sort this out quickly and get your daughter home." Catherine looked at the sergeant with cold eyes. "A mistake? You handcuffed my 8-year-old daughter and put her in a police car. What kind of mistake requires handcuffs for a child?" The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. "Well, she matched the description of someone who stole from the corner shop." "What description exactly?" Catherine asked sharply. "What did this thief look like?" Sergeant Peterson couldn't meet her eyes. "A young black girl with a school bag." Catherine felt her anger growing stronger. "So you arrested my daughter because she's black and carries a school bag? Half the children in this town match that description." The room fell silent. Everyone knew exactly what had happened, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Emma had been targeted because of the color of her skin. Within 2 hours, 3 of Catherine's colleagues from London arrived at the small police station. They had driven straight from Scotland Yard to support their friend and colleague. Catherine looked at the local officers with determination. "This isn't over. My daughter deserves justice, and so does every other child in this town." Catherine sat in her kitchen the morning after Emma's arrest, drinking her tea and thinking deeply. Her daughter was still sleeping upstairs, exhausted from the terrible day before. Catherine knew she had to be careful about how she handled this situation as a detective. She understood that she couldn't investigate her own daughter's case officially, but Catherine also knew something important from years of experience. This kind of treatment usually didn't happen to just one family. There were probably other parents in the town who had similar stories, but were too scared to speak up. Catherine decided to start asking questions quietly. She began by talking to her neighbors. Mrs. Johnson was the first person she visited. The kind woman had been the one to call Catherine at work. "Mrs. Johnson, I want to thank you for calling me yesterday," Catherine said as they sat in Mrs. Johnson's living room. "I need to ask you something important. Have you seen Officer Williams treat other children badly?" Mrs. Johnson looked uncomfortable. "Well, I didn't want to say anything, but yes, I've seen him stop young black children many times. He's always asking them what they're doing and where they're going." Catherine felt her heart sink. "How often does this happen?" "At least once a week. Sometimes more. The children always look scared when they see his car." Catherine thanked Mrs. Johnson and continued her quiet investigation. She spoke to other neighbors and shopkeepers round town. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Officer Williams had been targeting minority families for months. Within 3 days, Catherine decided to hold a community meeting. She put up notices round town inviting parents to come and share their experiences. She wasn't sure if anyone would come, but she had to try. The meeting was held in the local community center on a Thursday evening. Catherine arrived early to set up chairs. She was nervous that no one would show up. But as 7 o'clock approached, families began to arrive. First came Mrs. Williams, a quiet woman who lived 2 streets away from Catherine. Then Mr. Davis came with his wife. Soon the room was filled with about 20 parents and their children. Catherine stood up in front of the group. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know this is difficult to talk about, but I think it's important that we share our stories." Mrs. Williams was the first to speak. She was a shy woman who rarely talked to her neighbors. "My son James is 12 years old." She began with a shaky voice. "He's been stopped and searched by Officer Williams 5 times in the past 2 months. James was just walking through the park to meet his friends." The room was very quiet as Mrs. Williams continued. "Each time, Officer Williams asked James what he was doing and made him empty his pockets. My son started taking different routes to avoid the park. He shouldn't have to live like that. Double quotes. Mr. Davis spoke next. "My daughter Lucy is 16. She's a good student and works part-time at the bakery. But every time she walks to the shops, Officer Williams follows her in his car. Lucy told me she feels like she's being watched all the time." More parents began to share their stories. Mrs. Brown talked about how her 10-year-old son was questioned for riding his bicycle in his own neighborhood. Mr. Thompson described how his daughter was asked to show her school ID card while walking home from school. "I thought we were alone," Mrs. Williams said with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know this was happening to other families too. I felt like maybe I was imagining things or being too sensitive." Catherine listened to each story carefully. Her detective training helped her see the clear pattern of discrimination. "You're not alone, and you're not imagining things," she told the group. "What's happening to your children is wrong, and we're going to do something about it." The meeting lasted for 2 hours. Parents who had never spoken to each other before began to support one another. They exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch. Meanwhile, Catherine's colleagues at Scotland Yard were conducting their own official investigation. Detective Mills called Catherine with an update. "We've been looking into Officer Williams." Record, Detective Mills said, "It's worse than we thought. He has a clear pattern of targeting minority families. His reports show obvious bias. And we found several complaints that were ignored by his supervisors." Catherine felt angry but not surprised. "What kind of complaints?" Parents called to report that Williams was harassing their children. The complaints were filed but never investigated properly. The police chief seemed to dismiss them as unimportant. While the investigation continued, Catherine made sure that Emma was getting the help she needed. She took her daughter to see Dr. Roberts, a kind counselor who specialized in helping children who had experienced trauma. Dr. Roberts had a warm smile and a gentle voice. She made Emma feel safe and comfortable. "Your mummy is very brave," Dr. Roberts told Emma during one of their sessions. "She's helping to make things better for everyone in your town." Emma looked at Dr. Roberts with her big brown eyes. "Will other children be safe now? I don't want what happened to me to happen to my friends." Dr. Roberts smiled gently. "That's exactly what we're all working toward, Emma. Your mummy and many other people are working very hard to make sure all children feel safe." The investigation was building momentum, but Catherine knew the real work was just beginning. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with people brave enough to speak the truth. 3 weeks after Catherine's first community meeting, the investigation by Scotland Yard was complete. The results were more shocking than anyone had expected. Detective Mills called Catherine with the final report. "Catherine, you need to sit down for this," Detective Mills said over the phone. "Officer Williams wasn't working alone. We found evidence that 4 other officers in the department were also targeting minority families." Catherine felt sick to her stomach. 4 others. How long has this been going on? Our investigation shows this has been happening for at least 3 years. The department leadership knew about it, but did nothing to stop it. We found emails and reports that were ignored or covered up. Catherine closed her eyes and took a deep breath. So Emma wasn't the first child this happened to. There were others before her, many others. Detective Mills confirmed. But because of what happened to Emma and your courage to speak up, we can finally do something about it. The news spread quickly through the town. People were angry, but also relieved that the truth was finally coming out. Catherine knew she had to address the community again, but this time with the full facts. The town hall was packed on the evening of Catherine's second community meeting. Every seat was filled, and people stood along the walls. Families who had never attended a community meeting before came out to hear what Catherine had to say. Catherine stood at the front of the room, looking out at the crowd. She could see Emma, sitting in the front row with her classmates from school. The little girl gave her mother an encouraging smile. "Good evening, everyone," Catherine began. Her voice was strong but warm. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I know this has been a difficult time for our community." The room was completely silent as Catherine continued. "The investigation into what happened to my daughter Emma has revealed some shocking truths. Officer Williams was not acting alone. Several officers in our police department have been targeting minority families for years." People in the crowd began to murmur to each other. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others nodded as if they had suspected this all along. "I want to be clear about something," Catherine said, raising her voice slightly. "What happened to Emma could have happened to any of your children. This wasn't about one bad officer. This was about a system that failed to protect our children." Mrs. Williams, who had been one of the first to speak up at the earlier meeting, wiped tears from her eyes. Her son James sat beside her, holding her hand. Catherine looked directly at the families in the crowd. "But we have a choice now. We can let this terrible situation divide us, or we can use it to build something better for our children and our community." The crowd listened carefully as Catherine explained what would happen next. "Officer Williams has been charged with misconduct and abuse of power. The other officers involved will face similar charges. The police chief has been forced to resign." There was a burst of applause from the crowd. People had been waiting for justice for a long time. Catherine raised her hand for quiet. "But punishment isn't enough. We need to make sure this never happens again. New policies are being put in place to prevent discrimination. Community members will now have a voice in police oversight." Mr. Davis stood up from his seat. "What does that mean exactly? How will we know if officers are treating our children fairly?" "It means that citizens from our community will be part of a new committee that reviews police actions," Catherine explained. "You will have a say in how your local police department operates." But Catherine had even bigger plans. "I want to do more than just punish the people who did wrong. I want to build bridges between our police and our community." She explained her idea for a new program. Police officers would work directly with local schools and community centers. They would read stories to children, help with homework, and participate in community events. The goal is to build trust and understanding between law enforcement and the families they serve. Catherine said, "Our children should see police officers as friends and protectors, not as people to fear." A young mother in the crowd raised her hand. "How do we know this will work? How do we know the police won't go back to their old ways?" Catherine nodded. "That's a fair question. Change takes time and effort from everyone. But I believe that when people work together and get to know each other, good things can happen." Emma, who had been listening quietly, suddenly raised her small hand. Catherine smiled at her daughter. Yes, sweetheart. Mommy, does this mean other kids won't be scared of the police anymore? Emma asked in her clear, young voice. The room fell silent as everyone waited for Catherine's answer. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her brave daughter. That's exactly what it means, sweetheart, Catherine said, her voice full of love and determination. We're making sure every child in this town feels safe and protected. The room erupted in loud applause. People stood up from their seats and clapped for several minutes. For the first time in months, people felt real hope. They could see that change was not just possible, but actually happening. Mrs. Johnson, who had been the first to call Catherine when Emma was arrested, stood up and shouted, "Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for fighting for all our children." The applause continued as Catherine hugged Emma. The little girl had been through so much, but she had helped bring about something wonderful for her entire community. Real change was finally happening, and it had started with one mother's love for her daughter. 6 months had passed since the terrible day when Emma was arrested on Maple Street. The little girl who had once been so frightened was now standing confidently in front of her entire school. The assembly hall was packed with students, teachers, and parents who had come to hear Emma speak. Emma wore her favorite blue dress and had practiced a speech many times with her mother. She looked out at the crowd and took a deep breath, just like Catherine had taught her to do when she felt nervous. "Good morning, everyone," Emma began in a clear, strong voice. "My name is Emma Thompson, and I want to tell you about something that happened to me 6 months ago." The hall was completely quiet. Even the youngest children stopped fidgeting and listened carefully to Emma's words. "I was walking home from school one day, just like I do every day," Emma continued, "but something bad happened to me. A police officer arrested me even though I didn't do anything wrong. I was very scared that day." Emma paused and looked at her mother, who was sitting in the front row. Catherine gave her daughter an encouraging nod. "I cried a lot that day," Emma said honestly. "I didn't understand why someone would treat me that way, but my mummy taught me something important. She taught me that when bad things happen, we can choose to make them better." The crowd listened as Emma explained how her mother had fought for justice. She talked about the community meetings and how neighbors had come together to support each other. "My mummy didn't just get angry," Emma said. "She decided to do something to help everyone. She made sure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to other children." Mrs. Peterson, Emma's teacher, smiled proudly as she watched her student speak with such confidence. 6 months ago, Emma had been a frightened little girl who barely spoke in class. Now she was inspiring an entire school. The new community program that Catherine had started was working wonderfully. Police officers now visited schools regularly, but not to arrest children. Instead, they came to read stories, play games, and help with school projects. Officer Thompson, who had joined the police force just 3 months ago, had become especially popular with the younger students. He was a kind man who always had a smile for the children. He was not related to Emma's family, but he shared their belief that police officers should be friends to the community. "Officer Thompson comes to our school every week," Emma told the assembly. "He reads us stories and helps us with our math homework. He's very funny and makes us laugh." Some of the younger children in the audience giggled, remembering Officer Thompson's silly jokes from his last visit. Emma's voice grew stronger as she continued her speech. "You know what I learned from everything that happened? When we're kind to each other and speak up for what's right, we can change the world." The crowd began to applaud. But Emma wasn't finished yet. "I also learned that we don't have to be big or important to make a difference. Even kids like us can help make things better." Mrs. Johnson sat in the back of the assembly hall, wiping tears from her eyes. She remembered that terrible day when she had seen Emma being arrested. She had been the first person to call Catherine at work, and she had been the first to defend Emma to the police officer. The whole town had learned so much about courage from this little girl and her remarkable mother. What had started as a terrible injustice had become a story of hope and positive change. Catherine had been promoted at work and was now leading a national task force on police reform. She traveled to other cities to help them improve their police departments. But no matter how busy she was, Catherine always made time for the mentorship program she had started in their town. Every child deserves to feel safe and protected. Emma concluded her speech, and every grown-up should help make that happen. The assembly hall erupted in loud applause. Students, teachers, and parents stood up and clapped for several minutes. Emma smiled brightly as she looked out at the crowd. After the assembly, Emma ran to her mother, who was waiting in the hallway. Catherine knelt down and opened her arms wide. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Catherine said, hugging her daughter tightly. "You spoke so beautifully today. You've helped make our town a better place for everyone." Emma hugged her mother back. "Was I good, Mummy? I wasn't scared at all." "You were perfect," Catherine said with a big smile. "You're so brave and strong." Emma looked up at her mother with bright eyes. "Can we go get ice cream now? I think I deserve a treat." Catherine laughed out loud. "Of course we can. You've definitely earned it," as they walked hand in hand down Maple Street, the same street where Emma had been arrested 6 months ago. Everything looked different now. Children played freely on the sidewalks without fear. Neighbors chatted warmly over their garden fences, and when they saw police officers, the officers waved and smiled at the children. The corner shop where Emma had supposedly stolen candy now displayed a sign in the window that read, "All children welcome." The shopkeeper, Mr. Brown, always gave Emma a free sweet when she came in with her mother. Officer Thompson drove slowly down the street in his patrol car. When he saw Emma and Catherine walking together, he rolled down his window and waved. "Hello, Emma. Great speech today," he called out cheerfully. Emma waved back enthusiastically. "Thank you, Officer Thompson. Are you coming to read to us again next week? I wouldn't miss it." He replied with a warm smile. One act of injustice had sparked a movement of hope and positive change, and it all started with a little girl's courage and a mother's love. The end.